Tonight, one file on your desk is about to turn into the most dangerous case of your career, and by the time you're done with it, you'll understand exactly why nobody makes documentaries about it. Because the people doing it don't want to be found. Claim number 4471. B. Rear-end collision, intersection of 5th and Alvarado, 11:47 p.m. Claimant, Daniel Reyes, 34. Injuries, fractured tibia, whiplash, ongoing psychological distress. On paper, it's boring. It's the most common claim in America. Somebody got rear-ended, somebody's getting a check. 98% of these are exactly what they look like. This is the other 2%. Three things don't sit right with you before you've even opened the second tab. 1. The accident happened at 11:47 p.m. on a street with almost zero traffic, and yet there were, conveniently, two independent witnesses who both called it in within 90 seconds of each other. 2. The claimant's attorney filed the demand letter 4 days after the accident. 4 days. Most people don't even get their x-rays back in 4 days. 3. And this is the one that actually made you sit up. This is the third claim in 14 months from the exact same intersection, involving 3 different vehicles, all rear-end collisions, all represented by the same law firm. You pull up the firm's name, Castillo and Weiss, personal injury attorneys. Billboard lawyers. The kind with a jingle. That alone isn't a red flag. Half the personal injury attorneys in this city advertise on bus benches. But 3 claims, 1 intersection, 1 firm, 14 months. That's not a coincidence anymore. That's a pattern. And patterns are the only thing that gets you a real investigation instead of a rubber stamp. You open a new case file. Not a claim file, a special investigations file. The kind that doesn't get closed by a phone call. You've done this maybe a dozen times in 6 years. Most of the time, the pattern falls apart under scrutiny. Coincidences usually do, once you actually look at them. This time, it doesn't fall apart. It gets worse. 3 days later, you're at your desk with a subpoenaed traffic camera video pulled up, grainy, time-stamped, black and white. 40 seconds of footage. You watch it once at normal speed. Nothing unusual. A sedan approaches the intersection, brakes, and a pickup truck rear-ends it at what looks like maybe 15 miles an hour. Not nothing, but not violent either. Then you watch it again, frame by frame this time. And there it is. The claimant, Daniel Reyes, is sitting in the driver's seat of the sedan a full 4 seconds before the pickup truck makes contact. He's already braced. Both hands on the wheel, shoulders forward, head tucked slightly, like a man who knows exactly what's about to happen to his own body. Nobody braces for a surprise. You brace for something you're expecting. You keep scrubbing. Right after impact, Reyes looks directly at a doorbell camera mounted on a nearby building. Not toward it by accident. At it. For 1 full second, dead center, like he's checking that it caught the angle. Then he turns back around and starts yelling for help. That's not an accident victim. That's an actor checking his mark. Your supervisor, Margaret, leans in through your office doorway. Tell me you've got something better than a guy looking at a camera. Juries don't convict on eye contact. I've got 3 claims, 1 intersection, 1 law firm, and a claimant who braced for impact before it happened. You say? Give me 2 weeks. You've got 1, she says. This file's already flagged for settlement authority. Legal wants it closed before it becomes a bad faith lawsuit. That's the part that should worry you more than it does. The company would rather pay out a fraudulent claim than risk a lawsuit for denying a legitimate one. Fraud rings know this. It's not a loophole. It's the entire business model. Which means whoever's running this isn't sloppy. They're patient. And patient means organized. You pull the other 2 claims from the same intersection. Different names. Different cars. Same law firm. Same treating physician. A Dr. Aaron Kessler at a clinic 3 miles from that intersection. Same physical therapist. 3 strangers, 3 separate accidents. All somehow ending up at the exact same clinic, seeing the exact same specialists, represented by the exact same firm. That's not a coincidence. That's a supply chain. You're not supposed to do surveillance yourself. There are licensed investigators for that. But the file's on a 1-week clock, and the investigator you'd normally use is backed up 3 weeks deep. So you're here, parked across the street from a strip mall medical clinic, Pacific Rehab and Wellness, sandwiched between a nail salon and a check cashing store. Which, in hindsight, might not have been your smartest decision, but you don't know that yet. Over 4 hours, you watch 9 different patients go in and out. All of them walking normally on the way in. Most of them limping, dramatically, on the way out, the second they're back in view of the parking lot. One woman forgets. She walks out fine, gets halfway to her car, and then remembers to start limping. You get that on camera too. Then something happens that you did not plan for. A black Suburban pulls into the clinic's back lot, the employee entrance, not the patient entrance. A man gets out. Expensive suit, expensive watch, the kind of confidence that doesn't belong in a strip mall clinic parking lot. He goes inside through a door marked staff only. You don't know who he is yet, but you photograph his license plate, because 11 years of doing this job teaches you one rule above all others. The people who don't belong somewhere are always the ones worth photographing. Later, at your apartment, you run the plate through a public records lookup. It comes back registered to a holding company. 3 layers deep, an LLC that owns an LLC that owns the vehicle. That kind of structure isn't illegal on its own. Plenty of legitimate businesses shield their assets that way. But legitimate businesses don't usually need 3 layers of anonymity to own a Suburban that visits a strip mall clinic through the back door. You dig further. The holding company's registered agent is a law office, Castillo and Weiss. The clinic and the law firm aren't just referring cases to each other. They might actually be owned, in some layered, deniable way, by the same people. Which means this isn't 3 opportunists faking whiplash for a quick settlement. This is a business, a fraud ring, running staged accidents like a supply chain. Recruiters find the claimants. The clinic bills the inflated treatment. The law firm files the demand letters, and the insurance companies pay out because fighting every claim costs more than settling most of them. And you just took photographs of the man who might be running it. The next morning, your desk phone rings, an unknown number, blocked caller ID. You almost don't answer it. Special investigations investigators get threatening calls more often than people think. Mostly bluster, mostly nothing. You answer it anyway. You've been asking a lot of questions about a clinic you have no jurisdiction over. A calm, unhurried voice says. Not angry, which is somehow worse. Your stomach drops. Nobody outside your supervisor and one records clerk knows you were at that clinic. Which means either your car was made, or somebody inside the company is talking. I have every jurisdiction to investigate a claim filed against my company. You say, keeping your voice level, though your hand isn't quite steady. That's a generous read of your job description. Here's a less generous one. You close file 4471. B as a legitimate claim. You stop pulling records on the other 2, and everybody involved goes back to having a normal week. And if I don't, then you'll find out that fraud investigations aren't the only kind of investigation that can be opened on short notice. Yours, for instance, your expense reports, your mileage logs, your last performance review. People who dig for a living usually have something dug up on them too. If someone takes the time to look, the line goes dead. That's not a threat of violence. It's smarter than that. It's a threat of erasure, the kind where you don't get hurt. You just quietly stop being a threat, one manufactured complaint at a time, until you're either fired or too scared to keep pulling the thread. You sit there for a long moment after the call ends. This is the part of the job nobody trains you for. Not the spreadsheets. Not the frame-by-frame video analysis. The 4 seconds after someone tells you, calmly, that they know exactly how much power they have over your life. And you have to decide whether that's true. You walk into Margaret's office and close the door behind you. You look like you saw a ghost, she says. I think I just got threatened by whoever's running this. Not with violence. With my job. My records. Everything I've built here. Long pause. Then, quieter. How sure are you about the connection between the clinic and the law firm? Sure enough that somebody made my car within 4 hours of me sitting in that parking lot. That's not paranoia. That's confirmation. If you're right, this isn't 3 fraudulent claims anymore. This is a network, and networks like this don't just fold because one adjuster got spooked. They adapt. They lawyer up. And they make examples out of people who don't back off. So what do I do? That depends on whether you're asking me as your supervisor or as someone who's about to make a decision. I can't protect you from either way. Here's the math nobody at corporate ever says out loud. It is almost always cheaper for the company to pay a fraudulent claim than to fight it. Legal fees, expert witnesses, the risk of a jury deciding against you. All of it adds up to more than the $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a single staged accident claim usually costs. Which means if you walk into Margaret's office tomorrow and hand her everything you have, there's a real chance the company's own legal department tells her to close the file anyway. Quietly. Efficiently. The same way they've probably closed 2 other suspicious files from that same intersection. And if that happens, the man in the black Suburban wins. Not because he's innocent, because he correctly calculated that proving guilt costs more than tolerating it. But there's a second option. You take everything you have, the footage, the corporate structure, the pattern across 3 claims, and you send it somewhere the company's cost-benefit math doesn't apply. The district attorney's office doesn't care whether prosecuting this is cheaper than settling it. That decision has a cost too. The moment you go outside the company, you're not protected by the company anymore. If this blows up into a criminal case, you become a witness, a target, and a liability all at the same time. Margaret can't shield you from that. Nobody can. Your phone buzzes on the table. One new message from an unknown number. We know about the DA's office too. Think carefully about what you send them. You don't know how they know that. You haven't told anyone but Margaret that you're even considering it, which means either your phone isn't as private as you think it is, or somebody in this building is still talking to them. Part 2. The file that disappeared. If you want to find out who's actually leaking your investigation, subscribe, because Part 2 drops this week. And if you were sitting at that kitchen table tonight, would you send the file to the DA, knowing what it might cost you?